With one move, he killed the Raptor sect leader. With one move, he killed the Raptor sect leader. Moreover, the young Taoist didn't even move his hand, and only softly spoke a single word. No matter what, he was still a powerhouse of the gods' holy state. Just like that. Is there any law or no reason? It was like an ant that could be stepped on to death at will, but the ants had to be stepped on at least. But when young Taoist did not move his hands, Zhang Mengqin died. Nothing was left of his head. All of the elders and disciples of the Raptor sect were stunned. Many of them rubbed their eyes, thinking that they were seeing things. Half a minute passed. Only then did an elder let out a cry of alarm. Sect master! Sect master! Sect master is dead. The expressions of the 2,999 Iron Armor Eagle disciples went whoosh, and all of them stared at young Taoist with eyes that were filled with anger. Killing intent surged. Anger soared. The disciples of Raptor sect clenched their fists tightly. An elder shouted, "Fight!" When his voice fell, the Iron Armor Eagle immediately took battle form. The hearts of some of the elders in the Yu clan sank as they said, "We are finished. It's over. It's all over." He killed the Raptor sect leader. Our Yu clan, what should we do? Sect master, once Zhang Mengqin dies, that Vitality clan will definitely not let us off. When the time comes, I'm afraid we'll. Everyone knew that Zhang Mengqin was someone who came from the Vitality clan. Now that he was dead, the Vitality clan would definitely not let him off. So what kind of existence was the Vitality clan? The power of the gods' tribe. In other words, the Yu clan had already provoked the power of the gods' tribe. Even if he had 10,000 lives, it wouldn't be enough to kill him. Yu Fei said, "Sect leader, take this opportunity when Zhang Mengqin is dead. This is our chance." One of the clan elders immediately shouted, "Yu Fei, do you want to turn Yu clan into an irreparable calamity? Do you want to destroy Yu clan? Do you have a brain? Are we really afraid of Raptor sect? We are afraid of Vitality clan. We are afraid of God's tribe. Have you thought about the consequences?" Yu Fei said, "I don't care what you think, but since he is sick and wants his life, Raptor sect has been riding on our heads for the past year. It's time to take it back." First, it was like he was going to kill his way out. The hall was in an uproar. Long Fei glanced at the great hall, then said to the still kneeling elder, "Return and tell your sect master to calm down a bit, and just watch on the side. Don't be so King noisy. It's very annoying. Go." As though he had received an amnesty, the elder ran over and said everything that Long Fei had said. The faces of the elders darkened. "You think killing Zhang Mengqin is that big of a deal? Since you are so powerful, I shall see how you deal with the Raptor sect's 3,000 Iron Armor Eagle. Let's see how he dies. You don't know how high the heavens are and how deep the earth is. Do you really think that just because Raptor sect is missing a sect master, they will be able to cause chaos? He thinks too much. Let's see how he will die." He was filled with righteous indignation and felt extremely displeased. Yu Fei looked at Long Fei with anxiousness in his heart. He knew how powerful the Raptor sect was. It was not because of the death of Zhang Mengqin that their morale was in chaos. Instead, it was because of the death of Zhang Mengqin that they had the same enemy and became more united, erupting with even more power. 3,000 against 3. Long Fei did not win at all. Yu Fei wanted to go out and help, but Long Fei was too arrogant. Many elders were displeased. Even the sect master would not agree. However, Long Fei stood in place, not moving at all. The Wild King stood beside him. Rather than saying 3 people against 3,000, it would be better to say 1 person against 3,000. Young Taoist floated in midair, facing the strong Iron Armor Eagle. He only muttered, I know that all of you were forced, but none of you want them to control you. You yearn for freedom, but you need the sky. Don't worry. It's almost done. In midair, he sat down in the lotus position. He recited the words softly. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Countless golden runes appeared from his body and fell off one by one. In an instant, young Taoist stood up and giggled, saying, "It's done." As soon as he finished, when the disciples of Raptor sect saw the golden runes imprinted on their bodies, they swept and deflected them with all their might. They wanted to throw them off, but it was impossible. Thinking about the way the sect had died, their pupils constricted in shock. Young Taoist said indifferently, "Explode! Rumble! Rumble! Rumble!" The crazy explosion caused the bodies of the 2,999 Raptor sects to all explode, and they all died in an instant. Their heads were where they had exploded. The beast-controlling power built up by the Sea of Consciousness, and the iron armor eagle also instantly ruptured. The iron armor eagle let out a free scream, flapped its wings, and rushed into the sky. All of a sudden, 3,000 iron armor eagle flew in the sky. The scene was extremely spectacular. Young Taoist giggled and said, "Fly, fly." In just a minute, the originally black mass now had none. The entire Yu clan was abnormally quiet. It was so quiet that it would cause people to panic. All of them opened their eyes wide, their mouths wide open as they watched the young Taoist slowly descend from the sky. Is he even human? Is that child human? What did he just do? Oh my God, what just happened? Just 3,000 iron armor eagle, just like that. The strongest power in the Raptor sect disappeared just like that. He's definitely not human. All of them looked at young Taoist as if he were a god. They no longer dared to say any words of mockery, and didn't even dare to look at him with contempt. Young Taoist landed beside Long Fei and said, "Senior brother, everything is settled." Long Fei nodded, but his heart became tense. "Hey, the danger has been averted. Why haven't we heard about the system beep?" Logically speaking, this mission should have already been completed. What about the rewards? Damn! System, are you trying to cheat me? Long Fei opened the system to take a look and discovered that he had not completed the mission yet. A third of the time had already passed, which meant that Long Fei still had 16 hours to complete the mission. Rob. No reason. Long Fei couldn't understand, so he walked back into the hall to look at Yu Fei and said, "The danger to Yu clan has been resolved." Yu Fei was now incomparably reverent towards Long Fei, and even lowered his body when he spoke. Young Taoist and Rampage King stood behind Long Fei. The elders quickly moved out of the way, lowering their heads, not daring to look directly at him. Yu Fei said, Yes, Raptor sect is eliminated." The sect master of the Yu clan bolstered his courage and said, "Raptor sect is destroyed, but the danger to Yu clan is not. What we are afraid of is not Raptor sect, but the Vitality clan, the power of the gods tribe." After which, his body trembled. Scared, Long Fei muttered, "I understand." The threat was still there, and the mission was yet to be completed. The threat was still there, and the mission was yet to be completed. Hearing Yu clan's sect master's words, Long Fei felt relieved in his heart. I was wondering why it was an S-grade mission. So there was actually a Vitality clan behind it? The power of the gods tribe. Perfect. Long Fei did not speak further, and directly asked, "How far is this place from the Vitality clan?" Yu clan's sect master only said that casually. In his heart, he hoped that Long Fei could also casually take care of the Vitality clan, but he knew that it was impossible. She had more Overlord powerhouse than all the disciples in the Raptor sect. Furthermore, he was a power of the gods tribe. So if he wanted to touch Vitality Clan, he would have to go against the gods tribe. This was simply impossible, as no one in the universal realm would dare to go against the gods tribe. The outcome of going against the gods tribe was death, Sect Master of you Clan said. Sir, I was just saying casually, please do not take it to heart. Vitality Clan are not something that can be dealt with by one or two people. He had to bow to Long Fei and call him Master. Yu Fei also continued, Sect Master, whose words are true, the Vitality Clan are extremely strong. There are countless of them just based on Overlord Stronger Man for you to be able to help us get rid of the Raptor sect. We are already grateful. Long Fei did not want to argue, so he said, Tell me, where is the Vitality Clan? Don't talk so much nonsense. The power of the gods tribe. The reason he went back to the universal realm was so that he could rob God's tribe, let alone the fact that he was a member of the gods tribe. Even his homeland would have to defeat all 18 generations of his ancestors. No one dared to resist the gods tribe. Long Fei was the first person to resist the gods tribe. This time, if he could not defeat God's tribe, then he would not be surnamed Long. Even though he was still at level 1, Yu Fei looked at the sect leader, then said, Master, do you really want to go? Long Fei said, We must go. Even if I don't have a mission, I still have to go. This old man will see how strong the gods tribe is right now. In the end, if I can find a sovereign realm powerhouse, I can save myself a lot of trouble. Long Fei had never leveled up. These people's levels were too low. Moreover, what did leveling up mean? It meant that he was now at full health, meaning that he had revived. Even if he had a little bit of HP, he could instantly revive and level up sorrowfully. It was like a BUG. To Long Fei, his sadness was equivalent to a level. Kill anyone, and you can level up. Thus, Long Fei was not in a rush. Unless he met someone that was extremely powerful and was of a high level, he would not easily level up. Yu Fei said, All right, then I will bring you there. Let's go. It was loud. It was loud. Outside the palace. The sound traveled into the palace. The hall immediately quieted down. The hall elder was stunned. What is this place? Vitality Clan, Origin Energy Treasure Hall, where the high-level elders discussed and held a meeting, let alone disciples. Even elder-level people could not get close, and more so did not dare to make a ruckus here. If someone were to behave atrociously here, then this would be paving the way at the edge of the latrine, not too far from death. Thus, many of the elders thought they had heard wrongly. Just as they were continuing their discussion, there were 3 people standing at the entrance of the hall. An uproar. Dozens of pairs of eyes looked at Long Fei at the same time. It was extremely shocking. An elder asked, Which peak are you a disciple from? Don't you know this is the Origin Energy Treasure Hall? Leave immediately. Long Fei grinned, looked at the people in the hall, and cursed, Damn, I thought there was no one inside, but it turns out there's someone. That what? Are there any sovereign realm powerhouses? If you don't, then you can decide for yourselves. Long Fei was not interested. He had to maintain his level 1 advantage. The many clan elders were stunned. None of them understood what Long Fei was saying. Moreover, only Powerhouse of God's tribe would dare to speak like this in front of them. Otherwise, no one else would. The elder stood up. His eyes darkened, releasing the Overlord Realm's pressure. With a deep voice, he said, Brat, do you know who you are talking to? As soon as he finished, the pressure came. It directly exploded onto Long Fei's body. It was as if he made Long Fei kneel on the ground. Long Fei's mind sank, and the body of Towdy instantly formed a defensive barrier. He glanced at the elder and said, "Then do you know that you're about to die? You're courting death." The elder was enraged. His eyes widened, and with a flip of his right hand, he sent out a palm strike. The other elders did not move. They only discussed in low voices. Whose disciple is this? Who is this person? Warrior realm? It is impossible for Vitality Clan to accept such trash. He's going to be a dead man soon. Any of the elders present here were all Overlord Stronger Man-esque. With a single palm strike, their warrior realm would have directly turned into dregs. However, Long Fei did not move. The Savage King's body slightly jerked as his fist blasted out. Boom! The fist imprint visible to the naked eye blasted out towards the palm attack. The moment the two forces made contact, they instantly exploded. The palm attack shattered. The fist imprints didn't receive any resistance, and still charged forward with unstoppable force. The elder's eyes darkened. A burst of supreme force burst out from his body, turning into an air shield. Both of his palms sank as he flipped them over and shouted, "Essence break!" Rumble! Black blood spewed out of his mouth madly. He could not hold on for even a second. He died on the spot. Another instant kill. It was so fast that it made one's hair stand on end. The entire hall suddenly became silent. Long Fei smiled lightly and said, "Continue." Warrior realm. There was no pressure, no power to crush. However, it was as if all the Overlord powerhouse-esque in the Great Hall had been crushed by Long Fei alone. It was extremely uncomfortable, as if a death scythe was floating in their minds, and they would die if they moved even a little. The Vitality Clan Lord asked again, "Who exactly are you?" Long Fei shrugged his shoulders and said, "A person who specializes in killing gods' tribe dogs." How preposterous! Boom! The Vitality Clan Lord roared in rage. His robes ripped apart, and a golden light burst out. With a move of his fists, an extremely strong shockwave struck at Kwang Wang. In that instant, he released the power of a peak-level overlord. It was like a thunderclap. Rumble! 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 Attack! The corners of the Savage King's mouth curled up as he laughed in disdain. Then he took a step forward and blasted out a punch. Bam! There was a dull sound. The Vitality Clan's sect master fell to the ground with a thud. He was hammered to the ground in midair and smashed to the ground. The Savage King stepped on it and rubbed his nose. His gaze swept across the Grand Hall and disdainfully said, F***K. So boring. There's not a single person who can fight. Immediately, exerting force with his feet, a cracking sound was heard. Bam! The Vitality Clan's head was crushed. The bloody groove on top of its head revealed the bottom. The sect master of the Vitality Clan died. A punch and a hammer exploded. A punch and a hammer exploded. There was not the slightest bit of sloppiness. The Savage King's power was suddenly thrown into disarray. Long Fei was secretly shocked in his heart, as well, glad that he had brought him to the universal realm. What a tiger man! He. Long Fei laughed to himself. Those people in the Essence Palace all had expressions of fear on their faces as they stared at the Grand Master. Many of them were trembling in fear. No one dared to step up again. The sect head's cultivation base was higher than them. Since the sect master was dead, how could they be his match? If he went up there, he would be courting death. Long Fei looked at the system, and he still did not complete the mission and was startled. You haven't killed enough? He looked at the time again. There's still a little time. And then Long Fei said blandly as he took a step forward and said, Continue? Long Fei's words were like the voice of death. No one dared to speak. No one dared to go forward again. Long Fei laughed. Since there is no one else, let us talk about the heavens. Just a moment ago, you said that the gods' tribe was going to deal with the gods' design attic. The many elders glanced at each other. No one said anything. After all, this was related to the arrangements of the gods' tribe. Whoever said it out would be betraying the gods' tribe, and this outcome would be even worse than anything else. Long Fei laughed. No one said. Kwong Wong swept his gaze and hugged his fists together, causing his joints to crack. Every single elder's forehead was dripping with cold sweat. One of the elders could not take it any longer and said, "Right, God's tribe is going to deal with God's design attic." Long Fei said, "Very good, continue talking. How are you going to deal with God's design attic?" He swallowed hard and said, "In 3 days, the God's Design Attic's artifact forging hall will be open. God's tribe wants to deal with God's Design Attic in the artifact forging hall. In order to deal with God's Design Attic, God's tribe has gathered the strongest artificers in the entire universal realm. Moreover, when the time comes, there will be a competition. As long as God's Design Attic loses, then God's Design Attic would either submit to him or perish, and God's tribe will not allow him to have a third choice." The number of words was very fast. After he finished speaking, he panted heavily. Long Fei was silent for a moment, and then said to himself, "God's Design Attic has the strongest refiner. If God's tribe wants to compete with the refining pavilion, I'm afraid he won't be able to win, right?" That elder said, "It might not be possible with just God's tribe's refiners. But this time God's tribe has not only sent out Shrine's refiners, there's also a high possibility that there's an ancient world's refiner as well." God's Design Attic. God's Design Attic. Hidden amongst the God's Design token was the map leading to the God's Design Attic. God's Design Token S were only given out a few pellets a year to those geniuses who possessed strong refining talent. There were also some very special people. There were even fewer people who had been to the God's Design Attic than those who had entered the God's Tribe Palace. Thus, the God's Tribe Palace S, Mu Clan S, and God's Design Attic S were known as the Three Mysterious Lands. Shrine was the sacred place that martial arts training beings yearned for, the only place that led to the ancient world. The Xiao Yao City was an extremely happy place to be in the universal realm. The God's Design Attic was the holy land of artificers, and similarly, he was the land of treasures. It was rumored that every tree and flower in the God's Design Attic were treasures of the gods. Divine treasures were everywhere. Half of the divine treasures in universal realm came from there. The products of the God's Design Attic were definitely the best. God's Design Attic had a great reputation, being on par with him. However, this was not a good thing for the God's Design Attic. In this year's artifact forging hall, God's tribe suddenly said that she would send someone to participate. I'm afraid. A white-browed elder clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the heavenly mystery mountain. God's Design Attic was inside the secret world. It was like a small world. The mountain peaks were all suspended in midair. It was presented in the form of a crafting furnace. Every immortal mountain had a different type of element. It could be used to refine different divine weapons depending on the element. This secret world was like a divine treasure. The white-browed elder stood at the top of God's Design Attic. He had a secret lock on his forehead, so the words stopped at the tip of his tongue. It was just that. His frown deepened, and his eyes were full of worry. Another old man in a blue robe said lightly, "The Emperor Xian is about to attack us." The white-browed elder looked at the blue-robed elder and said, "Our God's Design Attic has no struggles in the world. We are only chasing after the most sacred path of artifact forging. We have no desire to fight for anything in the world. We have never thought of dominating anything, nor did we think of dominating anyone." He was puzzled. He was very clear about the methods of the God's tribe. Previously, they had only sent a symbolic elder to watch over him. However, this time, the gods' tribe was sending the refining chief master out to participate. What did this mean? This meant that the gods' tribe was about to make his move. Moreover, this was the order of the emperor, Xian. The blue-robed elder said, "You do not have the heart to be a hegemon, but he thinks that you do. That way, will our gods' design addicts still be able to live? Morong Xiong, are you helping us? You are probably trying to harm us, right?" The blue-robed elder said, "Do you think I would agree?" The smile on Morong Xiong's face did not lessen, and he said, "You have no other choice. Only I can protect this place. And I am not only protecting the gods' design attic. I am more worried that my nephew will appear here." The white-browed elder said, "With your nephew here, our gods' design attic will be in even more danger." "Senior brother, definitely not." The blue-robed old man did not refuse, but neither did he agree. Morong Xiong did not let him answer immediately, and said, "Think carefully. As long as your god's design attic is still here, you can give me an answer." "Right. I heard my nephew's King Kong is here." The blue-robed elder's eyes immediately darkened. Abbot Whitebrow's expression suddenly changed. Other than the two of them, no one else knew about Li Yuanba's situation in the god's design attic. Once word of this spread, the consequences would be unimaginable. But Morong Xiong looked at their nervous expressions and said, "Don't be nervous. Actually, I still have a lot of things I know." "Forget it. I can't be bothered to ask you to lead the way either. I'll look for it myself and find out what's going on with ancient world. Let's go, farewell." Before he finished his sentence, his figure had already disappeared. He couldn't sense anything at all, because Morong Xiong had already entered the spatial space. With sunken white brows, he said, "Senior brother, I knew that something was going to happen. Even Morong Xiong knew about it. How could God's tribe not know? This King Kong. Something bad is going to happen. Damn. Damn. If not for the God's Design Tokens map, the ghost would not have been able to find this place, God's Design City, South Gate. Long Fei, young Taoist, and Quang Wang stood at the main entrance as Long Fei was filled with emotion. What he had to sigh the most about was not the fact that the God's Design attic was hard to find, but the fact that his feather god wings was the most difficult to find. If he did not obtain the feather god wings from completing the mission, he would not be able to reach God's Design City, even if he was given 3 months. Wow. Senior brother, look in the sky. There are birds flying everywhere, and all of them are high-level divine beasts. This world is really interesting. Young Taoist looked at the immortal bird divine beast flying around in the sky and revealed a look of envy. The savage king glanced at him. Obviously, he had already lost interest in flying fairy beast. He looked bored. He only felt good because he wanted to find someone who could fight with him and have a good fight with him. The God's Design City was also known as the City of Organs. Unless this place was opened, it would be impossible to find it. Every year, it appears in a different place. Thus, they had to have God's Design token leading the way. Long Fei glanced at the sky, then laughed lightly. Actually, all it looks like is a bit more beautiful, a bit more gorgeous, but in reality, it's useless. All right, let me bring you guys to the city to have a look. Long Fei was a little excited in his heart. The 1-year agreement with Li Yuanba, God's Design attic. Long Fei said in his heart, Xianyuan Li Er and Lon Mei heard everything that I said to him at that time. He should be coming soon. I really miss them. Long Fei could not wait and walked towards the door. The entrance was very special. There were no guards, and no guide. The strangest thing was that there wasn't even a door. What's going on? Long Fei walked forward and looked at the rows of words on the wall. The God's Design token has activated everything. Long Fei took out the God's Design token and placed it on it. Crack! Walala! A series of sounds of a machine turning could be heard. It was also all of a sudden. A surge of power directly sucked Long Fei in. Wang, caught off guard, and not even having time to react, Long Fei was sucked into a powerful force, which then produced a buzzing sound as Long Fei entered into a wave of heat. It was like a portal in an online game. His eyes went black, and he opened them wide. In the next second, he appeared in the middle of the God's Design city. Long Fei turned around and realized that the place behind him was not a city wall. Junior brother! Long Fei shouted. Young Taoist was not behind him. The Wild King was not there either. Actually, the two of them did not react either. This was because they did not sense any dangerous auras, so they were careless. Long Fei instantly disappeared. The two of them looked at each other, blinking as they stared blankly. 2 seconds later, young Taoist exclaimed out, "Senior brother!" The Kuang Wang was also shocked. He did not dare to be careless. Who was Long Fei? If something were to happen to the future Eternal Lord, the 3,000 worlds under the Hall of Eternal Life would all collapse. Moreover, he would call Long Fei boss, and that way, he definitely would not let anything happen to Long Fei. Boom, boom. It didn't move at all. It was as if his strength had been blasted into the ocean. Huh. The Savage King was secretly shocked. He carefully looked at the city wall and said faintly, "Interesting." With regards to the young Taoist, the idea moved, and with a single step, it flew up into the sky. He wanted to fly in from the sky. With a single step, he flew down. He found out that the landing point was still outside the city gate. "I can't fly in." Young Taoist was also stunned. This city is so strange. The Berserk King continued his continuous attacks, yet he still did not destroy the city gate. Every time, it was as if his strength had been smashed into the sea without any bit of force. The two of them were ferocious, but to God's Design City, they were still confused. "Kuang Wang, what's the situation? Didn't you say that the level of this world is not high? How can there be something that can stop us?" young Taoist asked. Kuang Wang also scratched his head in puzzlement, saying, "How strange. What is this city made of, God's Design City?" It was called the City of Mysterious Gate Escape. It was very difficult to crack it. Of course, this was also because young Taoist and Kuang Wang had never encountered such a situation before. The two of them were outsiders, so they were stupefied. Young Taoist muttered, "What do we do now? Senior brother's cultivation is very low. Is he in danger? If something happens to him, Master will definitely not let me off. Don't worry, he's the Eternal Lord. It's good enough that he doesn't bully others, but who can hurt him?" the young Taoist said. Master said, "Senior brother's grasp of the power of eternity is not good. Moreover, this is his world. His level is so low. If there is someone who can deal with him, I'm afraid." The Savage King secretly furrowed his brows. He wasn't afraid of 10,000. He was only afraid of one. If something really happened to Long Fei, then he definitely wouldn't have a good ending. Kuang Wang said, "Let's split up and look for the entrance. I don't believe that this kind of plane can stop me. We'll gather here later." Inside God's Design City, Long Fei circled around but did not manage to find an exit. He stopped a passerby and asked, "Brother, where is the entrance to God's Design City?" The passersby laughed. "The God's Design token is the main entrance." Long Fei asked, "What do you mean?" The passerby asked, "Is this your first time entering the God's Design City? There are no exits or entrances in the God's Design City. So God's Design token are everything. Therefore, you must not lose them in this God's Design City." Long Fei asked, "Everything is inside the God's Design token? Could it be that there's an exit for the God's Design City inside?" The passerby said, "I advise you not to go out. the God's Design token that a newbie like you should be of a very low level and can only go in and out once. If you go out, I'm afraid you won't be able to come in again. And the passage to God's Design attic is about to open up. If we go too late, we won't be able to get a good seat. This year's refining ceremony will be extraordinary, and all of the God's tribe will be sending their powerhouse to attend. Let's stop talking. I need to hurry and occupy this place. Long Fei moved, took out the God's Design token, and checked it. Indeed, the idea moved, and the word out appeared on its surface. But, thinking about what the passers-by said, Long Fei's heart tightened. I came here to rebuild the sky sword, to look for brother. If they really can't see me, wouldn't they have missed it? Who? Long Fei let out a light breath. Although his level was only 1, and he lacked 2 great warriors, the young Taoist and the raging king, so his current situation was constantly dangerous. There are some things that must be done. Long Fei turned around and looked, then retracted his idea and walked toward the center of the city. The God's Design attic's entrance immediately opened. Everyone in the center of the city kneeled down in unison. The scene was even more spectacular than the appearance of the emperor. The current God's tribe was a lot more noble than the ancient emperors, who would dare not to kneel, who would dare to disobey. The end result was death. The 6th presbyter of God's tribe landed on the ground, revealed satisfied smiles, and said, "Everyone, get up. Today is God's Design attic's artifact forging ceremony. Our God's tribe is also here to spar. Our identities are all the same." 6th presbyter of God's tribe walked out and bowed to the 2 burly men behind them. Everyone felt a shiver in their hearts. If even the presbyter of God's tribe had such respect, then the identities of these 2 people, this was definitely not ordinary, especially the people from the God's Design attic. Grand Court, God's tribe's people are here. And other than the God's tribe's refiners on the list, there are 2 other people on the list. They wear veils and look down on people's looks, but their bodies are surrounded by a threatening aura, an aura completely different from that of the universal realm. A disciple hurriedly reported. Grand Court's eyes darkened. Ancient world's powerhouse. Whitebrow's eyes tensed up, and he said, "Senior brother, did the God's tribe really send the ancient world to battle? Then no way. I want to go to the immortal Jade Peak to inform Master." Grand Court wanted to stop him, but his white brows had already flown out. God's Design craftsman had been in seclusion for 18 years. Would he be able to comprehend the great Tao? It was still unknown. However, in the end, Grand Court did not stop Abbot Whitebrow. Perhaps only Master can stop them, and hopefully God's Design attic's calamity this time can be resolved. Notify the others. Open the passage. Let them enter the God's Design attic. Refining the heavens in 6 hours. Grand Court replied heavily. Finished. He too flew off in another direction. The direction in which Murong Xiong had disappeared in was also the immortal peak where Li Yuanba and Qin Yi were at. When the God's tribe's people arrived, he did not dare to delay any longer and immediately opened the entrance. In the center of the city, a sky stairway descended from the sky. The moment it landed, it formed a series of stairs, each of which were made of a special material. These materials all had one thing in common. They were all made from the result of thousands of tempering and tempering, 10,000 refinements. I heard that walking on this 10,000 refinement steps will provide a powerful refining upgrade, and it will be of great help to the refiners. Every step you take is refined by a powerful artificer. Rumor has it that the first thing an artificer who enters the God's Design attic to do is to refine the myriad refinement stage. Every step is an existence of the holy artifact's treasure. It was originally very quiet. It was originally very quiet. Long Fei squeezed forward and saw that everyone was in a daze. He was too lazy to say anything, so he just stepped forward. All of a sudden, the entire scene seemed to have exploded into an uproar. However, they still did not make a sound, but stared at Long Fei angrily, as though he was an old fogey who did not want to pay them back the money that he owed them. They all thought to themselves, "Is this guy crazy? Is this person crazy? Does he want to die? Does he want to die? Ha ha ha. This guy must be a joke. He's going to die. I can guarantee that he won't live more than 3 seconds. Even the presbyter of God's tribe was there. When would it be his turn to go up first? Long Fei was the first to go up and slap presbyter of God's tribe. How could presbyter of God's tribe let him go? The 6 presbyter of God's tribe stared at Long Fei with their 12 eyes, staring like lanterns, as though they were going to eat him up. Long Fei took a step forward and felt a unique aura beneath his feet. At the same time, he also felt as if there were millions of murderous intents behind him. Turning his head to look at them, Long Fei grinned. "With so many people looking at me, do you think I'm really handsome? Hee. There's nothing I can do about it. I've been so handsome ever since I was born." Hiss. While speaking, Long Fei sucked in a breath of cold air and muttered, "This flight of stairs is a bit interesting. Why do I feel like I'm tempering my body in a furnace?" A ball of fire instantly ignited in Long Fei's eyes. Fiery eyes of truth. Focusing and looking, Long Fei was even more surprised and said, "My God, this step is filled with holy artifact. It can raise refining force. Such a good thing." Excitement could be seen in his eyes. He could clearly feel the various refining force on the stairs, as if it was a teacher teaching him profound things. "Who are you?" Presbyter of God's tribe interrupted Long Fei's satisfied expression and said solemnly, "Do you know who we are?" Long Fei said, "I do not know who the both of you are, and I do not wish to know who the both of you are, so there is no need for the both of you to know who I am." Long Fei took a second step. "I was tempering in the fire just now, but now I'm tempering in the 10,000 hammer blows. Holy shit, this step is really awesome. Every step is different." Many people secretly stepped forward. They were all eager to give it a try. However, Presbyter of God's tribe's face turned sinister as he said solemnly, "Brat, I don't care who you are, come down right now, or I'll let you die on it." As soon as he finished, the aura on his body moved and charged forward. Boom! A loud explosion resounded. Long Fei's body trembled slightly, and he said, "Why are you coming down? There are holy artifacts on this step, and they can help you increase your refining strength." This God's design attic is truly generous. Even though we know it's going to be a refining competition soon, we still have to welcome you with this kind of holy artifact. Even God's tribe cannot do it. This should be the highest standard of treatment, even more powerful than the sect head welcoming him personally. The look on Presbyter of God's tribe's face became even more unhappy. Noticing his displeased expression, many of the elders of the major sects said, "Brat, come down quickly. Even if you want to go up there, it's not your turn to go up first." "What are you? Can you be the first to go up? Get the fuck down. Did you hear that? I told you to get the fuck down." Long Fei seemed to have provoked the wrath of the masses. However, Long Fei did not have any intention of going down, and said, "This step has an extremely strong power. Every step will increase 1 step, and the steps will also increase. Whether or not you can endure it will depend on your own comprehension ability. You want me to go down? Then come up here." The further he walked, the more Long Fei felt that his power was deep and profound, and the more powerful his profound meaning was. Every step was unique. The higher he went, the harder it became. Presbyter of God's tribe's eyes turned sinister as he bellowed, "You're courting death." As soon as he finished, a God's tribe guard stepped out and stepped onto the 10,000 refinement stage. Boom! Without doing anything, his body was instantly set ablaze as he felt an endless amount of energy being refined within his body. He couldn't even stand properly, and he fell down instantly. Fire! 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 The God's tribe guard walked down and looked at his body. It was completely fine. Just that moment, just now, it was as if he was going to be burned to death. Long Fei thought, "It does indeed have to do with my inherent skill refining." Upon seeing this, everyone's eyebrows tightened. A refining chief master said, "Seems like only refiners can climb this step, and it depends on talent. Those who do not understand refining will not be able to do so." "Master, that kid is right. This 10,000 refinement stage is the highest standard of reception in the God's design attic." Presbyter of God's tribe was still unhappy. He did not care if the 10,000 refinements was the highest standard. The fact that the God's design attic's grand court did not appear was the greatest disrespect to the God's tribe. Moreover, Long Fei made him very unhappy. His eyes narrowed as he said, "Kill that brat." The surrounding people were shocked. Several refiners stepped forward. Their cultivation bases were all over Lord Realm, and all of them were very strong. Both the artifact forging and martial arts training were powerful. Stepping onto the 10,000 refinement steps, he flew up and grabbed towards Long Fei's throat. Long Fei's mouth hooked up as he faintly smiled and said, "Kill me?" Suddenly rushing out, an old grandpa caught Long Fei off guard. Moreover, this old grandpa looked like a white-haired deity with a body of immortal bones. Seeing him rush in front of him with an excited look on his face, Long Fei retracted slightly, took half a step back, and looked behind him slightly. The heck! Behind him was the towering cliff. Not only that, Long Fei realized that all the mountains in the secret world were floating in midair. However, people can't. "Don't move!" the white-haired old man suddenly shouted. Seeing Long Fei retreating backwards, he immediately stopped and said nervously, "Don't move. Step forward slowly. I have to be slow. I have to be slow. I have to be slow." The old man was very nervous, and his voice was very low as he spoke carefully. Long Fei didn't know what was behind him. He just followed his instructions. He took a light step forward. It was also at this moment that rumble, rumble. A demon beast almost flew into the air right behind him. His spine was chilled. Long Fei was shocked. He looked up to the sky and exclaimed, "What a big bat!" A huge bat, just like a huge airplane, swooped down in a flash before it could bite Long Fei and disappeared from sight in the blink of an eye. The white-haired old man said, "This is the 1,000 Revolution bat. It's extremely poisonous and cannot be touched. Otherwise, its entire body will rot. Come, come, come." Without waiting for Long Fei's reaction, the old man grabbed Long Fei's hand and carried him into the cave with gleaming eyes. Skinny Bone Claw's hand that was like firewood grabbed onto Long Fei's arm as if it was locked by steel. Long Fei wanted to struggle, but was unable to. He was a little scared in his heart. "Old deity, are you sure you're mistaken?" The old man said, "That's right, you." Long Fei said, "Why is it me? I didn't do anything." He didn't understand. Wasn't it just running faster? How did we get here? Long Fei secretly thought, it's really not safe to not have 1 or 2 bodyguards around. The old man smiled. "I've waited for 3,000 years and have gone into closed-door cultivation countless times. This time I've waited for a person for 18 years straight. That person is you." As he spoke, he became even more excited. It was as if he couldn't wait for the rutting male who wanted to have a spanking relationship with him to bring Long Fei into the Ru family. Long Fei struggled with all his might and said, "Old deity, I'm not gay." The old man was stunned. "What is the basics? Ugh. Isn't this kid's mind too evil? What are you thinking about all day?" "Let me explain it to you first. I've been waiting for someone who can pass my legacy on to me, and that person is you. Because you took less than 5 minutes to refine 10,000 steps, and every step of the 10,000 refinement stage contained a powerful weapon crafting power. If you looked at the universal realm, or even the ancient world, no one could accomplish this in such a short time. But you appeared. Your refining talent is above average. No. To be able to reach the stage of refining 10,000 in such a short amount of time, you are the person I want to wait for. Come on, follow me," the old man explained and got impatient again. Long Fei reacted and said, "You set up a restriction on the 10,000 refinement stage. If you pass through the 10,000 refinement stage within 5 minutes, you would break through the restriction and come here." The old man said, "Smart. That's it. This is the cliff behind the immortal Jade Peak. You must be here to attend the refining ceremony. You don't need to attend. As long as you accept my challenge, you will be the master of the God's Design Attic." Long Fei was stunned. Become the master of the God's Design Attic? Holy **T. Old deity, you don't even know who I am, yet you want me to accept your legacy, and you want me to take charge of the God's Design Attic and become the master of the God's Design Attic. Aren't you afraid that I'll ruin this place? Long Fei was a little confused. There must be something wrong with this old man's brain. The old man smiled slightly and said, "Then don't worry. This old man has refined a weapon for his entire life and has also seen a person for his entire life. Refining a weapon, refining the heart first. Your talent has explained everything, else you would not be here." Long Fei muttered, "Your heart is truly big. However, I'm not interested in your clothes. I didn't come to the God's Design Attic to participate in some big refining ceremony. I came to look for the God's Design Craftsman." The old man's eyes started to tighten, and in the end, he smiled with his eyes narrowed. "What are you looking for God's Design Craftsman for?" Long Fei said, "Let him forge a sword for me." The old man said, "He hasn't refined a weapon in a long time. If you can pass on my legacy, he can refine it. So can you?" Long Fei immediately asked, "Can we recreate the sky sword?" As soon as he finished, the old man's expression suddenly tensed up. His eyes stared straight at Long Fei, sizing him up carefully, and said, You, who is Long Zhanting to you? Who was the previous owner of the sky sword? Everyone in the universal realm knew Long Zhanting. However, after that battle, the sky sword disappeared and never appeared again. Long Zhanting was also being suppressed in Dragon Abyss Dungeon. The sky sword did not have any news. The old man was shocked that the teenager in front of him had suddenly mentioned the sky sword. Long Fei's memories had not been restored, but the name Long Zhanting had appeared more than once. Long Fei was at the cliff behind the immortal Jade Peak. Long Fei was at the cliff behind the immortal Jade Peak. Right in front of the cave, Abbot Whitebrow called out anxiously. However, there was no response from the cave. God's Design Craftsman only frowned slightly as he looked at Long Fei and said, "God's tribe crushed the dragon race, and your father should not be locked in Dragon Abyss Dungeon as well. Don't you want to deal with God's tribe?" Long Fei replied, "Yes," the God's Design Craftsman said. "Now is the chance. As long as you pass on my legacy, I will be able to suppress the entire God's tribe. Don't you want to?" Long Fei said, "You want to suppress the God's tribe to the point that you want to pass on your mantle? It's fine if they don't inherit it. Refining to suppress the God's tribe, not to mention crushing them, pushing them out of their feces, was something that could be done with ease and pleasure. What was the realm of the refining techniques that he had mastered so far? He stood above the ancient world. So what if he was a master refiner of the ancient world? Thus, Long Fei had never thought of inheriting the legacy of the god's design craftsman, as it was completely useless against him. God's design craftsman was a little anxious and said, maybe I'm not as good as Long family in terms of martial arts training, but in terms of refining skills, I'm afraid no one in the entire Long family can compare to me. If you want to deal with the god's tribe, then start from here. Long Fei asked in confusion, I have a question. Since your artifact, forging skill, can defeat the god's tribe, why don't you take action yourself? Isn't that even better? What is my cultivation level? Warrior realm is the lowest level of existence. Even if I were to pass on your legacy, I still wouldn't have any spirit energy to support me in refining. What's the use of that? What Long Fei said was true. Refining required a formidable amount of spirit energy to support it. Long Fei was currently only at the first stage of cultivation. His spiritual energy was only at 100 points. So what if he had the god's design craftsman's refining techniques? Of course, the refining techniques that Long Fei had mastered in the Horcruxes family was different. God's design craftsman let out a long sigh and said, to tell you the truth, I am already unable to forge artifacts. Long Fei was startled. What's going on? God's design craftsman said. I am already unable to refine any more divine treasures. My hand. He reached his hand out from his sleeve. The hand was just skin and bones, and 5 fingers were like 5 bones. Not only that, his hand was still shaking as if he had Parkinson's disease. He couldn't stop shaking. Refining the weapon required stability. It was impossible to refine a weapon like this. God's design craftsman said, 18 years ago, I received Emperor Xian's permission to enter the ancient world to search for the highest realm of refining, but the refining techniques of the ancient world is far beyond my imagination, especially those demon dwellers. They were completely refining their artifacts with their lives, and after a single competition, their tendons in my hands were shattered. Although I won once, I was no longer able to hold onto my hammer steadily. For the past 18 years, I've been working hard to change the forging method, but I still couldn't. Even worse, after that competition, my heart became cloudy, and I was no longer able to perform at a normal level. That's why I wanted to pass on my legacy to you. Only you can help me, and only you can save God's design attic. When God's design craftsman spoke, his eyes were filled with bitterness. His heart was unwilling, but he had no choice but to accept his fate. It was also at this time, in front of the immortal Jade Peak, Abbot Whitebrow's voice rang out again. Master, disciple Whitebrow, please come out. Master, this disciple, Whitebrow, begs you to come out of seclusion. Long Fei said, you can pass it to your disciples. God's design craftsman shook his head and said, even though they are extremely skilled refiners, their talent is still limited. The 10,000 refinement stage takes more than 5 minutes. Even if I pass my legacy to them, they won't be able to take it. Long Fei said, you think so highly of me? God's design craftsman nodded his head. Your talent, your aptitude is the best I have ever seen. Moreover, you're from the Long family, so the dragon blood flowing in your body will create a powerful force. You are the best candidate. He looked excited. The more Long Fei looked at it, the more he liked it. It was as if Long Fei had immediately kowtowed to him and acknowledged him as her master. Huff! Long Fei let out a long breath, let it out lightly, and said, actually, about that, I do not wish to strike a blow to you. Your lifetime's cultivation, refining comprehension, and techniques are all nothing to me. Let me be more direct. Your refining techniques is just trash in my eyes." Originally, he wanted to be more tactful, but Long Fei was afraid that the God's design craftsman would hold him back, so he could only be straightforward. God's design craftsman was stunned. No one had ever dared to say such a thing in front of him. The God's design attic was the highest level of artifact forging in the entire universal realm. Disdain of this place, the number one artificer in the universal realm, was this arrogance? He must be blind. If anyone else in the God's design attic heard what Long Fei said, they would definitely laugh at his ignorance. However, God's design craftsman did not laugh, but looked at Long Fei seriously and said, "Say it again." Long Fei said, "I am not targeting you. I am saying that the entire universal realm's refining techniques is like trash." God's design craftsman's pupils tightened, and his expression became somewhat unhappy. The dragon race was arrogant, the strongest being on the surface. Once the number one family in the ancient world, he had the right to be arrogant, but to say that his refining techniques was trash, that was a little too much. You dare to speak like that? Even your father, Long Zhanting, would not dare to look down on my refining cultivation. You're too arrogant." God's design craftsman was extremely angry. Long Fei did not explain, but asked, "Are there any refining platforms in the cave?" The God's design craftsman nodded. Long Fei did not ask any more and walked into the cave. Bang, bang, bang. 3 minutes later, Long Fei walked out again, and God's design craftsman stood at the entrance of the cave. Seeing Long Fei walk out with a black sword, without any shine and without any energy aura, it looked like a piece of scrap metal and was not a weapon. Long Fei walked to his side, placed the sword in front of him, and asked, "Can you appraise what kind of sword this is?" God's design craftsman wanted to take it. Long Fei stopped him. "It's still better that you don't take it. You simply can't." God's design craftsman's gaze turned cold as he said angrily, "Brat, you're too arrogant. I have spent my entire life refining and refined countless divine weapons. Even if my hand tendons are broken now, I can still hold onto this sword." Finished. He snatched the sword from Long Fei's hand. It was also at this moment. His arm sank, and his entire body fell to the ground. If not for Long Fei's support, he would have been smashed into the ground. His hand was firmly pressed down. It felt as if the sword weighed more than 1 billion pounds. God's design craftsman's eyes trembled. He was completely stunned, and his eyes no longer looked at prideful eyes. Instead, they looked at Long Fei with incomparable shock. This sword, why is it so heavy?" The power of the Overlord realm caught Long Fei and directly brought him into the cave. On the other side of the cave, Disciple Whitebrow, please come out. "Master, God's tribe has brought refining chief master. If you don't come out, we won't be able to stop them. If we lose, God's tribe will definitely make us submit." "Master," Whitebrow was incomparably frantic. At this moment, God's Design Attic's Tianji Summit Plaza was already filled with people. These people were definitely part of the power of the God's tribe, the overlord level sects of the universal realm. The refining chief master of these sects were still okay. They could deal with them. But it was difficult for them to resist the God's tribe's refiners, the ancient world's refiners. "Master, the life and death of God's Design Attic is today. Are you going to come out?" "Master," Whitebrows raised his voice. At this moment, crash, when the stone door opened, God's design craftsman pulled Long Fei out and said angrily, shouting and screaming, shouting nonstop, "I am not deaf because of you." Whitebrow immediately laughed. "Master, you've finally come out of seclusion. I was just afraid that you'd be too engrossed in your cultivation to hear me." When his eyes saw Long Fei, he was slightly shocked and said, "Master, Who is he? I've never seen it before. He had seen all of the God's Design Addict's disciples, but only Long Fei did not. Moreover, coming out of the celestial wall cave was even more strange. God's Design Craftsman said, "Let me introduce to you." He took a glance at Whitebrow, then thought about Long Fei's Dragon Clan's identity, God's tribe's #1 wanted criminal, and changed his tone. "Let me introduce you to my ass." Whitebrow, God's Design Craftsman, said, "Call him Marshall Uncle." Abbot Whitebrow smiled. "So, it's Junior Disciple." God's Design Craftsman stared at him. "What Marshall nephew? I told you to call him Marshall Uncle." Bai Mei blinked at Long Fei and was a little confused to say, "Master, you're not mistaken, right? I call him Uncle Master? Is he still your junior? You can't. You never had a master, so logically speaking, he can't be your junior." God's Design Craftsman was also stunned for a moment, and then he muttered, "That's right. I have never refined a weapon to become a disciple. All of them were found by myself, so." He glanced at Long Fei. God's Design Craftsman said, "It is not right to call him Marshall Uncle. How about this? You call him Marshall Ancestor." Abbot Whitebrow was stunned again. God's Design Craftsman said with a serious face, "That's right, calling him Grandmaster. Grandmaster should not be wrong." Bai Mei looked at Long Fei, completely dumbfounded. The God's Design Craftsman scolded, "What are you still standing there for? Call him Grandmaster." Abbot Whitebrow felt very awkward. "Master, is there something wrong?" This age, this cultivation. Why? Can't call out." "How old is Long Fei? His cultivation is only at warrior realm. To call such a person Grandmaster?" God's Design Craftsman's eyes became angry as he said heavily, "If I tell you to call me that, just call me that. If you bullshit again, do you believe that I won't cut you up?" He understood his master's words very clearly. If he said that he would cut him, he would cut him, and seeing that Long Fei was not convinced, he said, "Master, Master Ancestor." God's Design Craftsman did not buy it, and said, "Louder." Abbot Whitebrow grimaced. He was extremely unwilling to accept this, but he didn't want to waste any time. At this time, the refining ceremony had already begun, and if he didn't return soon, something might happen. The God's Design Craftsman nodded his head in satisfaction and said, "All right, you can bring him to Tianji's summit. He can help you solve your problems." Huh. Long Fei was startled. Abbot Whitebrow was also stunned. The God's Design Craftsman said to Long Fei in a low voice, "If you are already a Grandmaster, why aren't you helping your grand disciple?" "Long Fei, God's Design Craftsman said, "Seeing you as the ancestor, you sure felt good." Abbot Whitebrow said, What's the use of him coming with me?" God's Design Craftsman said in a heavy voice. "What about him? He said to call him Grandmaster." Whitebrow said, Master, what's the use of coming with me? Can he deal with the master refiners of the God's tribe and the ancient world?" The God's Design Craftsman didn't pay any attention to him and instead said to Long Fei in a low voice, "If you help me solve this crisis, I will help you reforge a sky sword." Long Fei's eyes turned cold, and without hesitation, he shouted, "Deal." Even though Long Fei had the artifact Soul Clan's refining techniques, but how was the sky sword recast? Even though Long Fei had the artifact Soul Clan's refining techniques, but how was the sky sword recast? What materials do I need? He had no idea. Moreover, the sky sword spirit had told him to find the God's Design Craftsman. Probably, in this world, only the God's Design Craftsman could recreate Sky Sword. Long Fei gave the heart of the Sky Sword to God's Design Craftsman and said lightly, "Senior, I'll leave everything to you." God's Design Craftsman said, "I'll be counting on you too." Finished. He turned around and walked into the cave. He then shut the door with a bang. He only left behind a confused expression on his white brows. Abbot Whitebrow ran to the front of the stone door and shouted, "Teacher, master, master! This, master, come out of your seclusion. It's good for you to go to the Tianji summit. Master!" However, no matter how much he yelled, it was useless. The God's design craftsman had no intention of listening to him. Long Fei said lightly, "Let's go." Bai Mei turned to look at Long Fei, her eyes filled with anger. She had been unwilling to accept it since the start, but now that the God's design craftsman was no longer around, she directly revealed it. Staring at Long Fei, her white brows sunk as she said, "Brat, I don't care what you have done to Master. Just stand to the side when we reach the 1,000 Revolution Peak." It did not look good for Long Fei at all. Abbot Whitebrow's temper was rather explosive. If there was anything, it would be written on his face. If his master did not specifically instruct him, he would not even pay attention to Long Fei. Don't even bring him to the Tianji summit. Long Fei laughed bitterly and said, "Whatever you say is fine." Abbot Whitebrow let out a cold snort. He looked at the stone door with resentment, and his heart sank. What should we do now? It is simply impossible for Senior Brother and I to stop him with just our level of artifact forging. What should I do? Does Master really just watch helplessly as the God's design attic is destroyed? Sigh, a great disaster is about to befall us. Abbot Whitebrow was depressed. He was now incredibly worried because towards the Long Fei beside him, he did not hold any hope. So who would place their hopes on someone with a warrior realm? A fool is about the same. Tianji summit. I can't see my boss. As expected, the boss didn't come. It's not a matter of whether he comes or not. Is he dead or alive? In the dark, Xiao, Bai, and his group kept on attacking the people in the plaza, but no matter how many times they checked, they could not find any trace of Long Fei. Fu Xishan also walked into the room, shook his head, and said, "I asked for the name of the elder at God's design attic, but Long Fei's name was not found." Queen of Blood Moon's eyes went cold. Then, "Has husband not come back yet?" Su's tears fell down his face. The black hole engulfing everything. The entire western regions is gone. Big brother Long Fei. The more he spoke, the more tears welled out of his eyes. Lan Mei's eyes also tensed up. His fists clenched tightly as he stared at the nearby presbyter of God's tribe who was flaunting his strength, his teeth chattering loudly, before he shouted, "God's tribe!" Xiaobai said, "I believe Boss is still alive. It's just that he hasn't appeared here. Boss has experienced countless calamities, and every single time he has not escaped with his life, nothing will happen to him." Bing Huo immediately said, "I believe it too." Humph. Elder Swordsman let out a long breath and said, "Since Long Fei did not appear, then we must change our plans." Tandapeo said solemnly, "Change what? The boss is not here. This daddy is going to fight with the God's tribe dog." Tang Long stared at the two veiled demon dwellers, wanting to rush out several times. The senior Mia said solemnly, "Elder Swordsman is right. Since we think that Long family is still alive, then we must continue to endure. The current God's tribe is so powerful we cannot fight head-on. We can only wait for the right opportunity." Fu Xishan said, "Follow me back to the Merchant Union?" "My Fu family controls the secret world several times. As long as we hide inside the secret world, it would be very difficult to find the people from the God's tribe. I will keep a close eye on Long Fei." Fu Xishan was also anxious in her heart. It was just that she did not reveal it. However, Fu Xishan looked at the plaza and said, "It's just that this time, whether or not the 1,000 Revolution Pavilion can protect themselves. If the God's tribe wants to use the God's design attic, I'm afraid that the God's design attic will not be able to escape this time." A sinister look appeared in everyone's eyes. His eyes were filled with hatred, but even more so, it was filled with unwillingness. If they were strong enough, they wouldn't be able to avoid cowering like a turtle. After a long while, the elder swordsman said slightly, "Let's plan this out first. We will hide with business alliance of Fu family first. As for God's design attic, there's nothing we can do." The aura of the two ancient demon dwellers was extremely dangerous. It wasn't something they could deal with. Fu Shishan said, "Then you guys wait a moment. I'll take you guys to leave after I deliver the goods." In another place, Li Yuanba's gaze was also constantly searching. Boss, are you really not here?" Last time he missed the opportunity, Li Yuanba was extremely frustrated. He felt extremely regretful in his heart. This time he entered the God's design attic in advance because he was afraid that he would make another mistake. However, he checked everyone who entered the Tianji summit, but there was no sign of Long Fei. Qingyi comforted her. "Don't worry, he will definitely be fine." Li Yuanba's heart sank. "Boss, where exactly are you?" "There's really not much time left." Oya was watching. He also did not find Long Fei. Her heart was equally worried. After all, it was a black hole devouring. She didn't see Long Fei's figure, so she kept holding on to her heart and felt very uncomfortable. My nephew, are you here yet or not? Where are you? I'm really going to be driven crazy by you." Morong Xiong kept looking through them, but they were all nothing. There were tens of thousands of people in the plaza of Qianji Peak. It was very difficult to eliminate each of them one by one. Moreover, without a specific aura or special characteristics, finding a person was too difficult. Of course, that was not the absolute reason. They only placed their target in the middle of this group of people. They never would have thought that Long Fei would be brought to God's design attic by Whitebrow. "Who is he?" Grand Court looked at Long Fei. The white-browed man said angrily, "A useless person." "Senior brother, let's not talk about him anymore. Tell me about the current situation." He did not want to introduce Long Fei. He was even more unwilling to call Long Fei the ancestral founder. Long Fei was basically useless in his eyes. The Grand Court looked at Long Fei, and then his eyes turned serious as he said, "Morong Xiong is right. This time the God's tribe is going to take advantage of us. The God's design attic. Everyone here, all the artificers, are from the God's tribe. These weapons craftsmen from the various transcendent sects are still all right. The key is just those two." His eyes looked at the two demon dwellers with veils. Abbot Whitebrow's eyes narrowed. "A powerhouse from the ancient world." The Grand Court nodded. Long Fei also took the opportunity to take a look. In that instant, his eyes lit up with excitement. F***CK, two big bosses shining with golden light. With just a glance, Long Fei's gaze tensed up, his entire body filled with energy. With just a glance, Long Fei's gaze tensed up, his entire body filled with energy. "Boss, F***CK, I haven't seen any bosses in a long time. If I kill these two bosses, I should be able to reach the Martial Saint level, right?" Long Fei's eyes lit up. He said lightly, "Junior brother, Wild King, get ready." Before he could finish his words, Whitebrowed and Grand Court looked at Long Fei. Long Fei was also startled and thought, "Damn, I forgot that the two of them didn't follow us. This is going to be troublesome." What was the first reaction after seeing the boss? Kill him. Therefore, Long Fei immediately wanted the young Taoist and the Raging King to attack him together and leave him with some blood. He could also soar into the sky. But right now, the two of them were not by his side. This made Long Fei's heart shiver. "Damn." The white-browed man glanced at Long Fei, then turned to Grand Court and said, "Ignore him." "Senior brother, what about the two demon dwellers from ancient world?" Grand Court frowned. If Master is not willing to come out, then we will go deal with him. No matter what, we will do our best. Abbot Whitebrow was slightly discouraged. He still had some confidence in becoming a master refiner of the gods' tribe, but was he the powerhouse of the ancient world? He didn't have the slightest bit of confidence. He had never even been to the ancient world, nor had he seen what the ancient world's refining techniques looked like. However, they had heard from their masters that the ancient world's refining techniques was extremely powerful. That kind of ancient alchemy transcended everything in universal realm. The corner of Whitebrow's eyes glanced at Long Fei again, and even though he was thinking about it, he got a little angry. He didn't understand why Master wanted him to bring a brat like him here. What could he do? He really could not see any special power in Long Fei's body. With this kind of cultivation, he could not even beat her. How could he train to such a low level? The more he thought about it, the more frustrated he got. Abbot Whitebrow harumphed. Stay here and be honest with me. Don't create trouble for me. Long Fei shrugged his shoulders. Right now, he was thinking of a way to kill the two bosses. If Junior Brother and Wild King aren't here, he can only rely on himself. Grand Court took a deep breath and said, Junior Brother, let's go down. It's time. Immediately. Whitebrow warned Long Fei again. Brat, did you remember? Don't cause trouble for me. Grand Court walked down the gods' design attic. The group of elder refining followed him down. Inside the pavilion, only Long Fei and a few disciples remained. Long Fei was also too lazy to move. From his vantage point, he was able to see what was happening below. He really liked watching a show. Perfect. Let me see the strength of the two bosses and see if we can find any weaknesses. Long Fei was relaxed and satisfied. Grand Court walked down the gods' design attic. One of the presbyter of God's tribe immediately revealed a condescending sneer and said, Grand Court sure is impressive to actually make us wait so long. Those who don't know better would think that your God's design attic is above my God's tribe. Grand Court changed his smile, bowed slightly, then explained with a smile. Elder, you are overthinking it. How dare our God's design attic stand above the God's tribe? We're just a small forging ground. Not waiting for him to finish. Presbyter of God's tribe immediately cut him off and sneered. You still know that your God's design attic is only a small place for refining weapons? I thought your God's design attic was a god. Grand Court could only smile apologetically and said, Please forgive me, Elder. Forgive. Humph. You don't even have the right to be forgiven by me. Presbyter of God's tribe's face was full of arrogance as he ruthlessly trampled Grand Court, almost to the point of trampling him underfoot. The Grand Court didn't mind as he replied, Elder, the time has come. The heavens altar forging ceremony will soon begin. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, he was interrupted once again. Presbyter of God's tribe said, It's fine if the ceremony is a little slower. I still have Emperor Xian's message here. The rites of heavenly worship was extremely important to the artifact forging ceremony of the God's design attic. This was a belief in God's design attic. Moreover, he had been dragged out by the God's tribe for a long time, and now it was time for the sacrifice of the heavens. Everyone had their own beliefs. If their beliefs were trampled on and tainted, it would be a great humiliation. Grand Court asked, Can the Emperor Xian's words be said after the sacrifice is over? How dare you, Presbyter of God's tribe growled. How dare you? You dare to disobey Emperor Xian? Just like that, a big hat was put down. Grand Court's eyes darkened, and he said, Elder, I do not have any intention of offending Emperor Xian, but the heavens sacrifice ceremony is very important to us God's design attic, and the duration of the ceremony is very short too. If there's anything you want to say, we can talk about it after it. Is that okay? There was a hint of pleading in his voice. He was the pavilion master of the gods' design attic. He had to think for the gods' design attic. It was just that presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly and said, "Is the heavens sacrifice ceremony of any importance to you guys? Let me ask you now, do you dare to disobey the Emperor Xian?" It was just a few words from Emperor Xian. He was making things difficult for the gods' design attic. That was to put the Grand Court in an awkward position, and that was to humiliate the gods' design attic. Because this was a world under the control of the gods' tribe. You don't accept this? If you refuse to accept it, then try to make a move. The artifact forging ceremony did not even need to compete, and just killing the gods' design attic was easier said than done. Presbyter of God's tribe's face was filled with arrogance, waiting for Grand Court to go berserk. His disdainful face seemed to say, "Go berserk, come on, get angry. Let's see how I'll kill you." Abbot Whitebrow could not bear to watch any longer. The gods' design attic-s were all filled with righteous indignation, and wished that they could pounce on that presbyter of God's tribe and slap him hard in his face. However, they had to endure. If we are to compete in martial arts, let alone the gods' tribe, even the powerhouse-s of the various transcendent powers were not their match. There was still a slim chance of survival in the refining competition. At this moment, those sect powerhouse-s all looked at them with hostility, waiting for them to get angry. Grand Court clenched his fists tightly, a smile hung on his face, and he said, "All right, Emperor Xian is the boss. If he is anything, we will do our best to comply with him." He had to endure it. Presbyter of God's tribe sneered in disdain. "So you know how to be tactful." Abbot Whitebrow roared angrily, "Are you done yet?" Presbyter of God's tribe glared at him and said angrily, "Who do you think you are? You have the qualifications to speak in front of me? How dare you speak to me like that? Grand Court, he is humiliating me. I am here on behalf of the gods' tribe, and it is him who is insulting the gods' tribe. Can you bear the crime of insulting God's tribe?" Another shitty bowl was taken off. Presbyter of God's tribe smirked arrogantly as he looked at Grand Court proudly. "I forced you to do nothing. I forced you to do nothing, is to keep trying you. As long as you dare to rage, if you dare to make a move, then save yourself all the trouble and start directly." Moreover, his goal this time was to destroy God's design attic. If he could solve it by force, why waste his refining time? He kept going berserk. This forced the people of God's design attic to be unable to suppress the anger in their hearts. They had always been rebellious and unruly throughout their lives. Now that they were pressured by someone of similar age, the anger in their hearts was like a volcano that was about to erupt. Just because of his people from the gods' tribe, you can be so arrogant and despotic? Grand Court's eyes also tightened as he clenched his fist even tighter. Presbyter of God's tribe continued to speak. "Grand Court, do you know what punishment it is for insulting God's tribe?" Grand Court looked at Bai Mei from the corner of his eyes. Bai Mei looked at Presbyter of God's tribe. His body was covered in flames, and waves of heat waves were coming out from his head. It was as if fire was coming out from his head. The Grand Court said solemnly, "Elder, your words are serious, right? Junior brother did not say it on purpose. How would we, the gods' design attic, dare to insult the gods' tribe?" Presbyter of God's tribe laughed. "I didn't insult what you said. It doesn't count. Everyone present heard what he said just now. I am just asking if it's the people from God's tribe. Did he insult the gods' tribe?" Everyone shouted in unison, "Yes." Just like how the military instructor was shouting, his voice was neat and orderly. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed complacently. "Grand Court, you heard it? I'm not the only one who said that he had insulted God's tribe, right? In the dark. Fuck, isn't this too much? Lousy has never seen anyone bully others like that. Too arrogant. I can't wait to rush out and stomp on him. Xiao Bai and the others were also extremely angry. The gods' tribe was bullying him. They didn't want to give others a chance to live, so they could just stomp on them however they wanted. Not to mention delaying God's design addict's sacrifice to the heavens and tarnishing God's design addict's faith. Now that the God's design addict had insulted the God's tribe, how much of a bully was this? Elder Swordsman said solemnly, this world still relies on fists. If it wasn't the God's tribe who would dare to ride on the head of the God's design addict, this was reality. Whoever's fist was strong enough was the king. Emperor Xian, the #1 powerhouse, and the king of the God's tribe. Who would dare match up against him? Grand Court turned slightly and looked at the white brows behind him. Abbot Whitebrow clenched his teeth. He ruthlessly slapped himself in the face and said heavily, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Elder, please forgive me. Pa! A resounding slap. The surrounding people were shocked. Slap him in front of so many people. You have to know that he is second pavilion master of God's design attic. His identity is noble, but he actually slapped himself in the face. Presbyter of God's tribe trembled slightly. The smile on his face became even wider. Ha ha ha. He started to laugh loudly. It was just that. The laughter suddenly stopped. Presbyter of God's tribe was ice cold like an old eunuch and said with a duck-like voice, insulting God's tribe, you think a slap is enough? At this moment, every elder of the God's design attic had a sinister look in their eyes as they stared at the presbyter of God's tribe with furious eyes. Grand Court said solemnly, Elder, it was just an accident. Isn't this a little too excessive? Presbyter of God's tribe laughed. Have you passed? Why didn't I think it was enough? Wouldn't everyone be able to humiliate the God's tribe if he were to end things with just a slap? And what's wrong with hitting yourself? If you want to punish, then punish the people from our God's tribe. Abbot Whitebrow said directly, Come on, what do you want? Yo, you're quite stubborn, aren't you? Presbyter of God's tribe sneered. The corners of his eyes twitched. The elder behind him walked out. A 2-meter tall man. All the muscles in his body exploded. Hugging his fists together, his joints cracked. Standing in front of Abbot Whitebrow, he felt like he was a child. Without waiting for Abbot Whitebrow to speak, Presbyter of God's tribe coldly said, Attack! He opened his palm and viciously slapped downwards like a bear's paw. Bam! This wasn't a slap, but a ruthless smash that brought with it a strong wind. Furthermore, he exerted all of his cultivation, and with a slap, Abbot Whitebrow fell to the ground. His head slammed into the ground, causing blood to gush out like a fountain. Black blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth as well. The flesh on his face was split open, and even his bones were exposed. Half his face was split open. The sight was shocking. Second Pavilion Master. Second Pavilion Master. Master. Everyone from God's design attic surrounded him. Grand Court clenched his teeth and said, Elder, this should be enough, right? Presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly and said disdainfully, This old man doesn't remember this lowly one. Today, I will forgive you in front of so many people. If you let me hear about your disrespect towards God's tribe again, then it won't be a simple slap on the face. Ha ha ha. After saying that, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Aggressive. Xiao Bai, who was watching in secret, wanted to rush out several times. If not for being held down by the elder swordsman, he would really rush out. This was called sparing him once. If Abbot Whitebrow wasn't crippled by this slap, he would have been severely injured. He could no longer continue refining. He didn't want to waste any more time with nonsense. Right now, The Grand Court wanted to do one thing, and that was to fight. The battle for artifact forging. He used the battle to vent the anger in his heart. Let these people know what a God's design addict was. Presbyter of God's tribe's eyes turned sinister as his words became sinister. Grand Court, don't say that I didn't give you a chance. You'd better consider it again. It would be even better if the God's design addict submitted. This way, the God's tribe would have another dog. He could use it however he wanted. Moreover, this also greatly increased God's tribe's prestige. However, Grand Court did not have any intentions to think about it. Right now, it was already past the time of the sacrifice, and the faith in his heart had been tainted. Not only him, but the elder refining behind him was the same as well. All of them were filled with righteous indignation, wishing that they could immediately enter the competition. Humph, Presbyter of God's tribe coldly snorted. All right, since Grand Court refuses to accept your offer, then we will decide your fate through this refining competition. Emperor Xian said it. If the God's design addict is unable to refine a divine weapon that our God's tribe is convinced of, and if the refining level of our God's tribe cannot even reach that of the divine weapon, then there is no need for the God's design addict to exist anymore. As soon as he finished, the weapon in the hands of the gods' tribe guard trembled. Ha! Boom! A loud explosion resounded. The lances in their hands immediately bloomed like flowers as petals appeared on the tip of the lances. The faces of everyone present darkened. The annihilation spear, the holy artifact that have destroyed the dimension. It's actually the realm of destruction spear. Sure enough, the God's tribe is here to destroy the God's design addict. Now, God's design addict will have a hard time. The annihilation spear, as its name implied, it can destroy Secret World's holy artifact. There were a total of 18 of them, and Secret World couldn't even withstand the power of 18 of them. The most important thing was these 18 annihilation spears were crafted by the God's design craftsman himself, and were also weapons he forged for the Emperor Xian. He never thought that he would actually bring them here. Use it on him? The entire audience was in an uproar. The space between Grand Court's eyebrows tightened. In the dark, Fu Shishan came back in a rush and said, God's tribe is about to destroy the entire God's design attic. It's not like they'll be finished just by killing a few people. They even brought the annihilation realm spear. I think we should leave earlier. This time, God's tribe was determined to do it. There was no doubt that he wanted the God's design attic to be eternally doomed. He would definitely not let the God's design attic continue existing. If they continued to stay here, they would most likely die too. The senior Mia said solemnly, We cannot stay in this place for long. One annihilation spear is fine, but if we were to use 18 of them at a time, I'm afraid even if the God's design craftsman comes out, he won't be able to stop us. The elder swordsman also sighed. Who would have thought that the annihilation spear that the God's design craftsman forged himself would be used on himself? Xiaobai said, I don't want to go. Bing, Hu continued, I don't want to leave either. Jian Feng said, if the God's design attic is gone, where can we hide? God's tribe has this kind of holy artifact, which can destroy Secret World. How about we fight? Tang Long said with a heavy voice. Fight, Queen of Blood Moon also said lightly, fight. Lan Mei said, fight. Su Su said, I want to fight too. God's tribe is bullying others too much. Tendapeo said, if I die, I die. Even if I die, I have to drag someone from God's tribe down with me. For a time, his battle-intent soared. They did not want to run anymore, nor did they want to hide. After being chased for a year and hiding for a year, this sort of life was truly boring. Rather than going on like this, it was better to have a good time. Elder Swordsman looked at all of them, his fists clenched tightly, and said, All right, then let's fight. Ha ha. The senior Mia was also smiling like he was ready to throw caution to the wind. Fu Shishan said, "Since that's the case, then I will also go and prepare. Seems like Grand Court has made his choice." "Ha ha, I'm a bit old, but I'm still a bit hot-blooded." Xiao Yao Xiong gave a faint smile and said, "You're a bit stubborn. This is more fun." "God's tribe." "Ha ha." Murong Xiong's figure flashed and disappeared into the sky. Then, in an instant, he landed behind Li Yuanba. "Brother Yuanba, how is it? Have you found your boss? And my nephew?" Li Yuanba tilted his head to look at Murong Xiong, shook his head, and said, "There's no sign of boss, so he probably hasn't hurried over." Murong Xiong said, "It couldn't really have been swallowed by the black hole, right?" Li Yuanba said firmly, "Don't worry, it's not strange for anyone to die in this world, but he will definitely not die. He's my boss. Li Yuanba's boss." He had never doubted it. He had always believed that Long Fei was still alive. But it hadn't appeared yet. Murong Xiong laughed. "I also trust that nephew of mine, although I have never seen him before, but I feel that he is able to turn the sky upside down. Hee hee. God's design addict has made her choice. I'm afraid that if we go head-to-head with the God's tribe, what thoughts do you have? What's the level of those two demon dwellers from ancient world?" Murong Xiong was most worried about the two demon dwellers. From the moment he appeared until now, he did not make a single sound. It was incredibly quiet. This was completely inconsistent with the demon dweller's personality. Either it wasn't the demon dwellers, or if it was, then the strength of these two demon dwellers was frighteningly high. Li Yuanba also shook his head. "I can't see it either, but the qi on his body is different from normal demon dwellers. He has the inheritance power of the ancient world." *CK. Didn't they say that demon dwellers can't obtain the inheritance power? What's going on with these two? Murong Xiong's pupils tightened. Could it be the Emperor Xian's dog? What is he trying to do? Those evil beings were finally restrained by the seal. What is he planning to do now? Release them one by one? You want to open the void hole. You want those evil demons to slaughter ancient world and universal realm again. Murong Xiong said solemnly. Li Yuanba also frowned. He was also a little worried. If the void hole was opened again, this world would fall into an endless slaughter. There was no light, and blood flowed in rivers in all directions. Li Yuanba muttered in his heart, "Boss, where are you exactly?" "There's really not much time left." Murong Xiong said, "How confident are you in dealing with the demon dwellers?" Li Yuanba replied, "I don't know, maybe 50%. Murong Xiong muttered, "If you can open 50-50 of it, then the other two King Kong should be enough to deal with one, right?" Li Yuanba's eyes narrowed and said, "The other two Vajra? Who is it? Who came out of ancient world?" Murong Xiong laughed. "Sword Force King Kong, Yuling Guardian Warrior." Li Yuanba became excited. "Aoya, Holy Spirit." Murong Xiong smiled lightly and said, "Amen, they are also in the dark." Her white brows glanced at Long Fei and ignored him. One of the disciples by the side did not know of Long Fei's identity and said, "Do you have to say these words? Who doesn't know? However, what can you do without high-level pills?" "Exactly. Everyone knows this, yet you are the one to say it." Originally, they were already angry and had nowhere to vent their anger on. Now that Long Fei had said this, they all started to vent. Abbot Whitebrow glared at them and shouted, "All of you, shut up." Cough, cough, cough. If he spoke too much, the wound would split open again, and blood would immediately dye the gauze red. Black blood also leaked out of his mouth. Abbot Whitebrow's face paled. "Master, Martial Uncle, Master." A few disciples began to worry. Long Fei really could not watch any longer. He took out a pellet from his space ring and said, "Eat it." Her white brows raised as she looked at Long Fei, then looked at the pill in his hand. A disciple said with caution, "What pill?" Long Fei was too lazy to explain and said, "You'll know once you eat it." The disciple continued, "What pill is this? Who the hell are you? Could you also be God's tribe's dog? Master, who is this kid? Exactly, what is a cultivation of warrior realm doing here? This is the artifact forging ceremony. Is he an artificer? Brat, what are you doing here?" Many disciples questioned. Long Fei turned a deaf ear to them and ignored them. He said lightly, "If you want to get well immediately, then eat it. If you don't, then pretend that I never said anything." Whitebrow looked at Long Fei seriously and received the pill. "Master, we don't know his origins, so we can't eat randomly." "You're right, we didn't even find out this kid's identity." While they were talking, Abbot Whitebrow swallowed it. As the pill melted in his mouth, Abbot Whitebrow's pupils suddenly trembled. He abruptly shrunk his pupils. "Ah!" It let out a painful cry. The disciples around Long Fei immediately surrounded him. "What did you feed, Master?" Long Fei still did not explain. Abbot Whitebrow covered his face with one hand. His entire body was shaking. Even when his face was cracked, he didn't feel such pain. But now, he cried out involuntarily from the pain. His temper was so fierce that he wouldn't scream no matter how painful he was. But right now, he couldn't control it at all. Ah, what is it? This pill. Seeing how much pain his master was in, one of the disciples could no longer hold back and punched Long Fei. And at this moment, Abbot Whitebrow said with a heavy voice, "Stop." That person stopped and turned around to look at Abbot Whitebrow. "Teacher, Abbot Whitebrow stood up on his own. The bandages on his face fell off, and the torn flesh on his face completely recovered. There was even new flesh and blood, and even his bones had been repaired. In just a few seconds, all the injuries had healed." Abbot Whitebrow stroked his own face. The severe pain just now was due to the growth of his flesh and blood, which resulted in the sharp pain that came from the growth of his bones. "It's all right now. It doesn't hurt at all." Seeing that Abbot Whitebrow's injuries had recovered, the disciples were stunned. "Master, your injuries. Why is everything all right now?" He was stupefied, but his face remained as blank as ever. Abbot Whitebrow walked in front of Long Fei and asked, "Who are you?" He could be considered as someone who had seen much of the world. Even though he didn't know much about pills, he had never seen such a miraculous pill. Long Fei smiled faintly and said, "You should know very well who I am. God's design craftsman told you before." "Sure." Abbot Whitebrow didn't continue speaking. He still couldn't say the words "Ancestor Master." He only bowed and said, "Thank you. Thank you for your emphasis." However, Abbot Whitebrow spoke sincerely. Seeing Abbot Whitebrow bow in gratitude, the disciples beside him immediately let go of their concern and bowed as well. "Thank you." Long Fei laughed. It was not intentional. Bai Mei glanced out of the window and turned to leave. He wanted to help the senior brother. Long Fei said faintly, "I think it's best if you don't go down there. Take a look first. I'll deal with it later." Abbot Whitebrow thought of his own violent temper. Worried that he would cause trouble again, he said, "If I don't go down to help, senior brother alone will not be able to handle so many artificers." Long Fei said, "You won't be able to handle it even if you go down there. As your ancestor, how about I teach you a few moves?" The sky was God's tribes. The sky was God's tribes. The ground was the God's tribes. Even the air was God's tribes. Call the God's tribe a rule? To challenge the God's tribe? I'm sorry, but we can either follow the rules of the God's tribe or just follow the methods of the God's tribe. The appearance of the God's tribe meant everything. Whatever I say is what I say. If you sing a different tune to me, your father will go crazy. Who cares what kind of refining ceremony you are in? I'll just kill all of you God's design attic. Let's see how you're going to play with me. Grand Court was very clear on this point. If he wanted to save God's design attic today, the only way was to win. Victory to the end. Only by winning would the God's tribe have no reason to go berserk. However, this was an unfair competition. Want to win? It was too difficult. Forget about these tens of thousands of master artificers. Even the two ancient worlds had crushed his head like two mountains, causing him to be unable to breathe. However, if he wanted to save God's design attic, he could only win. Grand Court endured it heavily and said, "All right, let's follow the rules that the elders have set for us. Elder, please begin." Presbyter of God's tribe smiled and said, "Let's begin." Fuck, isn't this too despicable? This way, God's design attic will really be forced to his death. There was originally a slight chance, but now it seems that there is no chance at all for God's design attic. I'm afraid even the refiners that God's tribe brought with him would not be able to make it out alive. The battle of attrition is so King sinister. God's tribe is really shameless. Shall by, and the others said angrily. The elder swordsman said, "This way, most of the God's design attic's refiners will be exhausted. When the time comes, we will fight like vegetables being chopped from a radish, one at a time." Senior Mia asked, "Since when did God's tribe have such a group of sinister dogs?" Xiaobai looked at them and asked, "What can we do?" The elder swordsman shook his head. "This is a refining competition. We do not understand refining. If we go out, it will only cause trouble for the God's design attic, and it will also cause the God's tribe to find excuses to go crazy." Tandapeo sighed and said, "If only Boss was here, he could refine anything." That's right. If only Boss was here. He's a top-notch expert in smithing. Boss, where are you? Achoo, chew. Damn, which chick is missing me? Long Fei sneezed 3 times in a row. He looked at every corner of the plaza and was disappointed. Li Yuanba did not appear. Xiao Bai and the others did not appear. Lan Mei, Su, they did not appear either. Long Fei muttered, "Where are you now?" It can't be because no God's design token can enter, right? Long Fei was also secretly worried in his heart, but now was not the time to be worried about this. As long as they were alive, they could find it. Right now, the most important thing for him to do was to deal with God's tribe and protect him. He came here to rebuild the Sky Sword. Before God's design craftsman can recreate his Sky Sword, he must protect them. Despicable God's tribe dog. It really is a war of attrition. Abbot Whitebrow glanced outside the window and gave a fierce shout. Long Fei glanced at her white brows and said, "Hurry up and cultivate. Don't waste time." Abbot Whitebrow nodded repeatedly. "Yes, yes, martial ancestor. I will go right now." Actually, to the presbyter of God's tribe's surprise, their battle of attrition was extremely beneficial to Long Fei. If the first explosion was like pulling apart rotten weeds, God's design attic would definitely not be able to handle it. However, the battle of attrition gave Long Fei enough time to train Abbot Whitebrow. By May was the peak refiner of the universal realm. His comprehension and aptitude both exceeded Long Fei's expectations, and his cultivation speed was extremely fast. He only had a little more time before he could advance. This was the accumulation of many years of artifact forging. It was just like how, in the past, he had only practiced the basics. Now that he had reached the advanced realm, he was naturally much faster. God's Design Attic wins. Next, God's Design Attic wins. Next. One after another, master refiners came forward to challenge the other. These master refiners from the hegemon level sects were not weak, and the master refiners of God's Design Attic would have to waste a lot of energy to deal with them. After several consecutive rounds, his physical and mental strength had reached the point where he was unable to endure even spirit energy. God's tribe wins. Next, another elder of the God's Design Attic walked down, his head lowered in dejection as he looked at Grand Court and said, "Grand Court, I am useless. This method of theirs is simply too much." Grand Court comforted her. "It's fine. Go to the side and rest." Refining spiritual power required a high degree of concentration. After a few rounds, his spirit power couldn't hold up any longer. It didn't matter if he lost, but this loss would cast a psychological shadow over every refiner, and the path of the refining process in the future would become even more difficult. God's Design Attic wins. Next, God's Design Attic wins. Next. A few presbyter of God's Tribe S were seated on their teachers' chairs, waving fan in their hands as they smiled proudly. They were not concerned about the results of the competition at all, as they knew what the final outcome would be. God's tribe wins. Next, another presbyter of God's tribe was defeated. His face was pale, and he gasped for breath. Presbyter of God's tribe mocked, "Grand Court, you are just like that as a master refiner. After a few rounds, you are already exhausted, like a piece of trash. Ha ha ha." The elder glared at him furiously. "You..." Presbyter of God's tribe sneered and said, "What about you? You're still admitting to being a trash?" "Trash." Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the spot. Every single refiner who entered the God's Design Attic was a genius refiner, and all of them were a little proud. It also had a huge impact on other weapons craftsmen. Grand Court's eyes darkened, and he said, "Maintain your heart." Presbyter of God's tribe sneered and said, "Keep your guard up, hurry up, and call your men over." God's Design Attic wins. God's Design Attic wins. God's tribe wins. Next, every 10 rounds, there would be one elder from God's Design Attic who would lose. In this way, the God's Design Attic would lose without even needing to be an artificer. Moreover, every elder on the God's Design Attic side had done their best and had exhausted themselves. It would take them at least 3 days to recover, but 3 days was too long. After a full day, there were only 10 elders left on the side of the God's Design Attic. On the other side, the elders of the God's Design Attic were all panting heavily as they were unable to recover it all in a single day. But there were still more than half of the 10,000 refiners here. God's tribe wins. Next, Presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly and said, "Grand Court, send someone to compete with us." There were only a few pavilion masters left. He was also a master refiner at the peak of God's Design Attic. Grand Court's expression darkened. With a ball of fire burning in his heart, he said heavily, "I'll do it." The corner of Presbyter of God's tribe's mouth curled up, and he spoke with a tone like an old eunuch. "Let's begin." Boom! The refining fire on Grand Court's body instantly burst forth, igniting the flames in the furnace. With a flip of his hand, the artifact forging hammer in his hand struck out fiercely. Bang, bang, bang! A few seconds later, the refining fire on Grand Court's body extinguished, and the fire died down. The entire audience was stunned. Presbyter of God's tribe's pupils also shrank as he stared at the pill refined by Grand Court. With the flickering of his eyes, he could tell that it was not an ordinary item. Inwardly, he was overwhelmed with shock. refining a divine treasure in just a few seconds. How strong was this? The level of this refining techniques is simply unmanned. Isn't it too fast? The refiner opposite us has yet to even start a fire. Holy sh*t. Is this still something a human can do? Impossible. It's too fast. Fuck, this isn't even human. I didn't even get a good look. Is this the level of the #1 blacksmith in Universal Realm? The entire audience was shocked. It was an incomparable shock. Grand Court's technique was too fast. He could not even see what Yun Che had just done. The artificer on the other side of the refining platform was even more dumbfounded. Just now, when he had taken out his crafting hammer, the other side had agreed upon it. The mighty Grand Court. The mighty Grand Court. The elder from the God's Design attic shouted loudly, venting the anger in his heart. Godly speed refining technique. Senior brother is indeed a senior brother. To think that he actually grasped a refining techniques at lightning speed. It's really powerful. The senior brother is truly mighty. Abbott, white brow, glanced at the window. Incomparable excitement. Long Fei muttered, Godspeed refining technique? Whitebrow said, You didn't see it clearly just now, did you? This is the refining techniques that the senior brother created himself. In the past, the senior brother only wanted to save some time, but he never thought that it would actually have such a miraculous use today. It's really amazing. This kind of refining techniques used speed to decide everything. It all depended on speed. From the burning of the fire to the end of the refining process, everything had been completed in one go without the slightest pause in between. One quick. Long Fei said lightly, Its speed is indeed fast, but this method of refining would probably require a lot more energy to complete, right? Abbott Whitebrow was stunned. I don't know about that. Long Fei glared at him and said, Since you don't know, then why don't you quickly go cultivate with me? Hurry up, you don't have much time left. If you keep on slacking off, you better be careful of my master's anger. Abbott Whitebrow retracted his neck, then immediately ran to another side to train. Long Fei looked out of the window with interest at the Grand Court and muttered to himself, Divine speed refining techniques. This skill is indeed not bad. It can save a lot of time. Let's see if I can control it. Long Fei's eyes moved. His pupils turned into flames. Eyes become the mode of the fiery eyes of truth. The power of the fiery eyes of truth could see through everything, as could its speed. If Grand Court were to once again use the fast refining method, he would be able to see every single movement clearly. Long Fei wanted to copy the refining techniques at lightning speed. Bring it on. Let's start again. Presbyter of God's Tribe's eyes turned slightly sinister. God's Tribe's limelight had been crushed by him, causing his expression to turn unhappy, but he was not anxious. He coldly said, As expected of Grand Court, you are truly extraordinary. He actually managed to refine a divine treasure in such a short period of time. Amazing, amazing. With a slight movement of his finger, he said, Next one. A master refiner stepped onto the refining platform. Grand Court made the same polite gesture as before. Please, let the duel begin. Grand Court made another series of beautiful movements. In one breath, bang, 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 completed. The flames of refinement on Grand Court's body extinguished, and the aura on his body calmed down. Yet another godlike speed. Under the fiery eyes of truth, everything was being played slowly. This speed was too fast. Long Fei secretly thought, he really is fast. Even though he was using the fiery eyes of truth slowly, he was still unable to see everything clearly. He thought to himself, I don't believe this. Presbyter of God's Tribe laughed coldly, and his finger spoke again in a feminine tone. Next. God's Design attic wins. Next, God's design addict wins. Next, God's design addict wins. Next, the wild victory that he had received along the way, and the crushing of everything were all completely performed by the Grand Court alone. It was too fast. It was too fast. It was so fast that those refining masters from the sects lined up one by one, but just as they steadied themselves, they lost. They had no idea how they had lost. The Grand Court didn't even give them a chance. Each time was completed in one go. Every single time, a divine treasure would be created. Compared to that, it was like the Grand Court pressing you down on the ground and rubbing it with all his might. You couldn't even move at all. God's design addict wins. Next, God's design addict wins. Next, the sex artificers kept on walking and then kept on walking. They could only stand on the refining platform for a few seconds and then lose. In just 2 short hours, more than 1,000 refiners had been defeated. 10 hours was more than enough time for 5,000 refiners. The most important thing was Grand Court's breathing was stable, his face was not red, and his heartbeat did not accelerate. 2 hours of high-speed refining did not exhaust him at all, so it was not difficult to last 10 hours in this situation. Presbyter of God's tribe's gaze darkened. Although he was shocked, he also hated them even more. This was because the aura coming from Grand Court was simply too strong. The sex artificers that he brought were simply like ants that had been completely crushed by the Grand Court's aura. Even if they could refine now, they wouldn't be able to produce anything good. Not only that, the artificers of the God's tribe were also being crushed by the aura of the Grand Court. This speed, this level was too strong. God's design addict wins. Next, with another heavy sound, Presbyter of God's tribe clenched his fists tightly and said solemnly, "A bunch of useless trash." Everyone on the God's design addict was excited. Grand Court is indeed Grand Court. He really is amazing. This achievement probably won't lose to the God's design craftsman back then, right? Morong Xiong let out a faint sound. Looking at Grand Court's performance, he was also incomparably shocked in his heart. Li Yuanba said, "His consumption." Morong Xiong nodded and said, "You can tell? It looks like his breathing is stable, his breathing is flat, but his energy consumption is very serious. Although he uses a few seconds of time to recover every time, he is, after all, just an artificer, not a martial arts training practitioner. A few seconds of recovery is nothing to him." Presbyter of God's tribe only sensed that Grand Court's aura was stable and thought that it did not cause any consumption, but if not, Grand Court's consumption would be extremely huge. After 2 hours, more than half of his profound qi had been consumed. There were still more than 4,000 blacksmiths who wanted to persevere. To him, this was an enormous test. Li Yuanba said, "He probably wants to do it in one go, just that. I wonder how much longer he'll be able to last." Morong Xiong said, faintly, "It's good that I can persevere for a long time. What I'm worried about now is whether or not God's tribe can come up with some scheme. If their limelight was crushed like this, where would the face of the God's tribe go?" Every one of the presbyter of God's tribe had an ugly expression on their face. Under the Grand Court's quick refining techniques, the people they brought were like idiots. They lined up one by one, and then lined up one by one. If he wasn't an idiot, then what was he? Where is the might of the God's tribe? What was the face of the God's tribe? If this matter were to be found out by the elders of the shrine, and the Emperor Xian found out, they would definitely be punished. A few presbyter of God's tribe looked at each other, then squinted. It was also at this time God's design addict wins. Next, one of the presbyter of God's tribe slowly stood up and walked towards the refining platform. Everyone shivered. Is presbyter of God's tribe going to fight? Presbyter of God's tribe, can't watch this any longer. Ha ha, Presbyter of God's tribe is going to make his move. This time, I can directly kill his prestige. The numerous artificers were all suppressed to the point where they couldn't even breathe after being pressured by the Grand Court's divine speed forging method. They felt extremely uncomfortable. Seeing Presbyter of God's tribe walk out, their hearts slightly relaxed. But the most puzzling thing was that this Presbyter of God's tribe held a weapon in his hand and walked up to the refining platform. This weapon was not a hammer, so what was he trying to do? Everyone was puzzled. Grand Court said lightly, "Elder, after you." Presbyter of God's tribe also sneered and said, "Please." Grand Court did not think too much about it. The refining platform was a place where weapons were refined. He had spent his entire life refining, and when he stood on the refining platform, he was a completely different person with his 120,000 points of penetration. Unless the refining was complete, he would not relax even a little. Such people were born to do only one thing. Moreover, when he was doing it, he was at the level of one with the world. He would ignore everything that was happening in the outside world. The refining fire on his body moved. He had once again entered into the realm of artifact forging. But at this moment, one of the pavilion masters from the God's Design attic widened his eyes as he shouted, "Grand Court, be careful!" The weapon in the hands of the God's tribe's refiner smashed down heavily, and a huge power exploded out from the tip of the spear. Grand Court raised his eyes. Seeing that Presbyter of God's tribe was going to fight, he wanted to be even faster and used this speed to ruthlessly crush Presbyter of God's tribe. This time, he was even faster. However, he did not expect that the Presbyter of God's tribe was not here to forge artifacts, but was instead here to take his life. He flipped the holy artifact that he had refined. Buzz. Protect in front of your body. The power from the powerhouse of God's tribe's weapon shot out, striking the holy artifact he was refining and producing an explosive sound. Rumble! Rumble! A violent explosion sounded. Grand Court was immediately blasted away. Bang! He heavily smashed onto the ground, causing the ground to crack. Grand Court's body bounced as he spat out a mouthful of black blood. Everyone from God's Design attic rushed forward. Grand Court! Grand Court! Senior brother! God's tribe, aren't you guys going too far? Their eyes were all filled with rage. That Presbyter of God's tribe splayed his hands, made an innocent expression, and said, "Refining failure. It was definitely a refining error. I don't want to be like this, but everyone has their own mistakes. You guys are all refiners. Don't you guys have your own mistakes?" A mistake. You call that a mistake? You attacked the Grand Court the moment you started. What kind of mistake is this? Is that what you call deliberately doing? The pavilion masters were infuriated. The Presbyter of God's tribe immediately said, "You should be careful with your words. How did I do that on purpose? If I say I made a mistake, then it's a mistake. At worst, I'll just lose this match. You aren't letting us make any mistakes." He had a complacent look on his face. The Presbyter of God's tribe stood up. His face was filled with a cold smile, and he said, "There are mistakes. Everyone. Grand Court has already won. Grand Court can stand up and continue. If he can't get up, then he's a replacement." Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. The people of Presbyter of God's tribe and the sects all laughed loudly. He was laughing with incomparable joy. Fighting with the God's tribe? Do you know how to write the word die? These people who came to the God's Design attic did not think that they could use normal methods to win against the God's Design attic. These people who came to the God's Design attic did not think that they could use normal methods to win against the God's Design attic. They only wanted the result. The process didn't matter. Anyway, With history in the hands of the powerhouse, what could the process do? This world was a place where the strong preyed on the weak, and the powerhouse was the king. Since you choose to fight with the God's tribe, then make all the preparations. God's tribe's actions made everyone in the God's design attic unhappy. Seeing that Grand Court was heavily injured, all of them gritted their teeth, wishing that they could pounce over and fight to the death. As long as the people of the God's design attic dared to make a move, then this refining competition would be spared. This was the result that the people of God's tribe wanted to see. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly and said, "What? All of them looked like they wanted to eat someone? You want to make a move against me? Come on, I'll sit here. Make your move. Hurry up and make your move." He had an expression that made one want to slap him a few times. A few bloodthirsty God's design attic disciples could not hold it in any longer. Grand Court crawled up heavily from the ground and said with a deep voice, "Refining continue." He said in a low voice to the pavilion master beside him, "Let them not move recklessly. If they attack, we would not have any chance." While they were talking, step by step, he returned to the refining platform. It was just that. His face became very pale. The corners of the presbyter of God's tribe's mouth hooked up as he sneered. "You aren't even dead? Grand Court, your life is really tough." Grand Court said lightly, "Elder, continue." Presbyter of God's tribe's gaze turned sinister as he said in a heavy tone, "Continue. This old man wants to see how long you can hold out for." He once again returned to the refining competition. Those weapons craftsmen from the sects walked forward one by one. The refining fire on Grand Court surged. Boom! It was a little messy, not as smooth as it had been in the beginning. Moreover, his breathing was ragged. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed sinisterly. "I thought you weren't injured. Hee hee. I want to see just how long you can hold on. Just you wait till you die." Very difficult. Every step Grand Court took was now extremely difficult. But even if it was even more difficult, he had to persevere and, at the very least, defeat these sect weapons craftsmen. Even if he lost, he had to lose with dignity, and lose so that the whole world would remember this place, and remember this place, God's design attic. This was what Grand Court wanted to do now. Fight for reputation. God's design attic wins. Next, God's design attic wins. Next, another series of victories. Although Presbyter of God's tribe and the rest were unhappy, they all had gloomy expressions. They knew that Grand Court would definitely not be able to hold on for long. This is F*** king bullying. Do these God's tribe dogs care about face? I'm ashamed of them all. I can't take it any more. Xiao Bai and the others clenched their fists tightly, wanting to rush out and give that presbyter of God's tribe a good beating. He had seen bullies, but he had never seen one. How infuriating! The elder swordsman said in a deep voice. Even though the Grand Court used his holy artifact to block off some of the energy was God's tribe's power. The Grand Court's internal organs were shattered quite a bit. He is currently burning his own life force to block. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for long. Senior Mia said, "We should also make the arrangements." Xiao Bai took the lead and said, "I will kill the elder who spoke those words. I will definitely tear his mouth to shreds. Let's see what he will say in the future." Ice and Fire said, "The one I have, They knew that they might all die after this battle. However, he had to fight. What was the point of living like this? In this world, living is one thing. If you're unhappy, then living isn't that fun either. They were ready. Prepare for battle. Morong Xiong said slightly, "Just as I expected, God's tribe dogs are God's tribe dogs. Dogs can't stop themselves from eating feces. They can even use such a despicable method. Looks like I still have to use force to settle everything. However, I like this method of resolving things. Li Yuanba glanced at Qing Yi, who was beside him. Qing Yi chuckled lightly. I am your woman. Whatever you do, I will follow. You don't need to worry about me. She loved the big man in front of her. Deep love. No matter who Li Yuanba wanted to deal with, she would stand by Li Yuanba's side. Although the gods' tribe raised her, she died because of him. This was the second time that someone she deeply loved had given her life after her revival. None of these people caused her to have any feelings for the gods' tribe. So when she saw everything that happened in front of her, she saw the ugliness of the gods' tribe. This way, she wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. Murong Xiong smiled lightly and said, I really envy the two of you. I need to hurry and find a woman. Only then will I be able to be more eye-catching. All right, there's still some time left. You can do whatever you want to do. I'll arrange it for you. Murong Xiong gave an evil expression and disappeared into the void. Qing Yi's face reddened. Li Yuanba said naively, What are you doing? Qing Yi lightly leaned against Li Yuanba's shoulder and softly said, You can do anything you want. Li Yuanba said, I don't want to do anything. Qing Yi pouted, Big stupid cow. God's Design Attic wins. Next, God's Design Attic wins. Next, he was still winning, and his speed was even faster. An hour passed. Grand Court was still on refining platform, still winning. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours passed. Grand Court was still holding on, but his chest was covered in the blood that was coming out of his mouth. His body was on the verge of collapse several times. However, he was still trying his best to persevere. The entire plaza became incomparably quiet as everyone looked at Grand Court. Boom! God's Design Attic wins. Next, he had won another one, and at this time, he had already supported himself with exactly 10 novels in the refining platform. One man against thousands. Just how terrifying was this existence? Although those who lost didn't do anything on the stage, they were convinced. There were no complaints. He also secretly admired Grand Court in his heart. However, so what if he admired her? Grand Court was at most a formidable person, but in the end, she would still be eliminated, and in the end, the God's Design Attic would still be defeated. Grand Court stared at Presbyter of God's tribe and said, Clan Elder, continue. Presbyter of God's tribe's eyes became gloomy. He stood up and swept his eyes over the sex artificers who had lost and coldly said, A bunch of useless things. Hugging his hands, his joints creaked loudly. He stepped forward, walking to the front of refining platform. He stared at him and laughed sinisterly. Grand Court, let's begin. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.